Imagine risking your career for someone you've never met, only to discover that your sacrifice might just be the key to your future. Caleb Walker didn't just fix an ambulance that day. He fixed his destiny. You won't believe what happens next. Before we dive back in, let us know where you're watching from. And if you're moved by this story, hit subscribe. We've got more surprises coming your way. Let's get started. The steady hum of rain against the windows of a small auto repair shop echoed through the room, matching the rhythmic movements of Caleb Walker, a seasoned mechanic in his early 40s. Caleb, with his graying beard and hands weathered by years of work, was hunched over the hood of a vintage Dodge Charger, his focus unwavering as he worked. For him, it wasn't just about fixing cars, it was a way of life. He had spent the last 17 years in this small town of Redwood Falls, working at his own repair shop, Walker's Auto. His shop was tucked away on the edge of town, a modest, aging building surrounded by trees that seemed to whisper in the wind. The neon lights flickered occasionally, casting a soft glow on the cracked concrete floors that had seen their fair share of tire marks and oil stains over the years. It wasn't much, but to Caleb, it was home. He had inherited the shop from his father, who had passed away 10 years ago, and now it was his turn to carry on the family legacy. Caleb's day was typical. The smell of engine oil, the hum of old radios playing classic rock, and the constant clatter of tools. But lately, something was different. There was a quiet tension hanging in the air. Caleb could feel it, but he wasn't sure why. He pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. The rain had been relentless for hours, but Caleb's focus was on the car in front of him, not the weather. The engine of the Charger rumbled beneath his hands, the vibrations familiar and comforting. He'd spent a lifetime working on machines, learning their language, feeling what others couldn't. His shop was his sanctuary, and the old car under the hood was his latest puzzle. But then the phone rang. "Caleb," came the familiar voice of his longtime friend. "Victor, the fire chief. We've got a problem. An ambulance broke down on Route 7 about 10 miles out of town. They've got a critical patient on board. Can you help?" Caleb paused, wiping his hands on a rag, his mind racing. He looked over at the clock on the wall. It was already late afternoon. He had a deadline to meet with a local client, Mr. Thompson, a well-known business owner in town, who needed his car back by 6 p.m. Thompson's car had been in Caleb's shop for days, and the pressure to get it finished was starting to mount. "I can't. Victor, I've got a job to finish here," Caleb replied, glancing at the unfinished engine. Victor's voice tightened. "You're the only one in this town who can get that ambulance back on the road. That patient's life is on the line. Caleb?" The weight of the decision hit Caleb hard. Mr. Thompson's car was important. It was his most valuable customer, but a human life. Caleb glanced at the rain slashing against the windows, his mind racing. He hadn't spent years under the hoods of cars to ignore when a life was at risk. After a long pause, he sighed. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. As he grabbed his coat and keys, a sense of clarity washed over him. He had made his choice. He didn't know it yet, but this decision would change everything. Caleb sped down Route 7, his headlights slicing through the sheets of rain. His worn-out truck felt like an old friend on the road. But tonight, even the steady hum of the engine couldn't calm his nerves. He wasn't sure what he was expecting when he reached the scene, but he wasn't prepared for what he saw. The ambulance, its emergency lights flickering weakly in the rain-soaked night, was parked on the shoulder, its engine dead. 2 paramedics stood beside it, looking frantic. The driver, Miguel Sanchez, waved his arms as Caleb pulled up. "Thank God you're here," Miguel shouted, his voice strained. Caleb jumped out, grabbing his toolbox from the truck bed. "What's the situation?" he asked, his mind already working through possibilities. "A woman, about 50. She's in critical condition, heart attack. We're trying to get her to Redwood Memorial, but the engine just died. We radioed for help, but the nearest unit is at least 30 minutes away." "She doesn't have that long." Caleb's stomach tightened. He had always known the stakes in this line of work, but this was different. This wasn't a car. This wasn't a job. This was a life. He immediately lifted the hood of the ambulance, his trained eyes scanning the components, as rain dripped off his hat and splashed onto the concrete. He worked quickly, his fingers tracing the wires, listening to the hum of the engine. Minutes passed like hours. Miguel stood anxiously by, shifting his weight from foot to foot. How long is this going to take? Caleb didn't look up. "Give me 10 minutes. I'll get you to the hospital." As he worked, Dr. Sarah Jenkins, the paramedic who had been attending to the patient in the back, emerged from the ambulance. She was in her late 30s, with dark eyes that held a mix of exhaustion and determination. "How's it coming?" she asked. "I think I've found the issue," Caleb said, his hand still moving swiftly. "Loose fuel line. I can patch it temporarily, but you'll need a proper fix once you get to the hospital." Miguel handed Caleb a roll of duct tape from the emergency kit. Caleb worked with swift precision, his mind focused solely on the task. Within minutes, the temporary fix was done. He slammed the hood shut and stepped back, wiping his hands on his rain-soaked coat. "Start it up," he said, stepping aside. Miguel turned the key. The engine sputtered for a moment before roaring to life. The paramedics let out a collective sigh of relief. "Get her to the hospital," Caleb said, stepping back as the ambulance pulled away, its siren blaring. "And don't thank me," he muttered under his breath. "Just get her there." As the ambulance disappeared into the rain, Caleb stood there for a moment, watching it fade from view. The rain, now lighter than before, seemed to reflect the uncertainty in his chest. He had made the right choice. But at what cost? He glanced at his watch, 4:30 p.m. Thompson's car. He wasn't sure if he had enough time to make it back. And in the back of his mind, a voice whispered, "What happens if you lose that client?" Caleb barely noticed the rain had stopped as he drove back to his shop. The sound of his tires on the wet asphalt, the only noise filling the silence. His thoughts were a jumble of what he had just done fixing an ambulance. Saving a life, but also walking away from an important job. The very one that could make or break his small business. The thought of Mr. Thompson's Mercedes waiting in his shop gnawed at him. What had he just sacrificed? But then, as he turned onto the road leading back to town, something caught his eye. A news van parked in front of the diner. A handful of people in business suits were gathered outside, their hushed conversations creating an undercurrent of tension. It was then that he remembered. The woman he had saved in the ambulance, Elaine Thompson, wasn't just any woman. She was the CEO of Thompson Enterprises, the largest tech firm in town. He had no idea who she was when he fixed the ambulance, but now he realized he might have just made a bigger impact than he ever imagined. Caleb parked in front of his shop, his thoughts spinning. He hadn't expected the world to notice, but now, with the faint sound of a local news broadcast still echoing in his mind, it felt like everything was suddenly on the line. He walked into his shop, finding Carl, his lead mechanic, bent over a set of tools, clearly trying to avoid looking at Caleb. "Bad timing for a rescue mission." "Huh," Carl said quietly, not looking up. Caleb wasn't sure how to respond. His fingers itched to dive back into the car he had abandoned, but a nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach kept him still. It wasn't just a rescue. "Carl," Caleb said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "I didn't know who she was at the time, but that woman's life was in my hands, and I chose to help." Carl gave him a sideways glance, setting down his wrench. "You think it was worth it? You risked your business over it." "I did what needed to be done," Caleb replied, his words firm but unsure. "And now I have to live with the consequences." But as he said those words, the weight of them seemed to lift. For the first time in a long time, Caleb realized he didn't regret his decision. He'd acted because it was the right thing to do, whether it cost him his business or not. He had done something that mattered, and for that, he could stand tall. The silence that followed was heavy, but not oppressive. Carl finally spoke again, his voice a little softer. "You might have just changed your life today. You know." "I think I already did," Caleb said, staring out at the empty road ahead. "But I didn't expect the world to notice." Caleb had barely finished washing his hands when the phone rang. He wiped the grease off his palms. Not sure whether he wanted to answer. It was probably another call about someone else's car breaking down or asking about an estimate. But something told him this one might be different. He picked up the receiver. "This is Caleb," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Mr. Caleb West." The voice on the other end was sharp, with a tone of authority that Caleb instantly recognized. "Yeah, who's calling?" "This is Rebecca Summers from Thompson Enterprises. I'm calling on behalf of Mrs. Elaine Thompson. She's asked to speak with you directly. Would you be available to come by the office tomorrow?" Caleb's heart skipped a beat. Elaine Thompson, the woman he'd helped in the ambulance, wanted to speak with him. He wasn't sure what to think. Part of him felt unworthy, like he didn't belong in that world of suits and high-powered decisions. But another part, the part that couldn't shake the feeling that this was all meant to be, knew he had no choice but to go. "Tomorrow." "Sure, I can make that work," Caleb replied, though his voice faltered slightly. "What time?" 10 a.m. "Please be prompt. Mrs. Thompson is eager to meet with you." The line clicked, and the phone went silent. Caleb set the receiver down slowly, a mix of disbelief and excitement flooding through him. Could this be a new opportunity? The thought of walking into the office of Thompson Enterprises seemed like something out of a dream. But as he stood there in his mechanic's uniform, surrounded by the tools of his trade, Caleb realized something. This was an opportunity he couldn't let pass. He might not know what Elaine Thompson wanted from him, but he did know one thing: this was bigger than just fixing cars. It was about making a difference in a world that seemed to care more about profit than people. That night, Caleb hardly slept. He tossed and turned, running over what he would say, how he would present himself by morning. He knew there was only one thing to do: walk into that office, no matter how out of place he might feel, and show them what he was capable of. The next morning, Caleb stood in front of Thompson Enterprises, feeling like a fish out of water. He was a small-town mechanic, used to the smell of grease and the sound of engines. Now, standing at the sleek glass doors of a corporate empire, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. But as he stepped inside, a quiet sense of confidence began to settle over him. He had earned this moment, and whatever happened next, he was ready to face it. Caleb sat in the sleek, minimalist office, the high-rise windows providing a panoramic view of downtown Charleston. He could hear the faint hum of the city below, but the noise felt distant. The walls were lined with polished wood, a contrast to the gritty, grease-streaked walls of his former garage. His hands, rough from years of wrenching engines, fidgeted on his lap as he waited. He was out of his comfort zone, surrounded by polished leather chairs and the quiet murmur of professional conversation. Mrs. Elaine Thompson entered the room like she was walking onto a stage. Her presence filled the space before she even spoke. With her sharp business suit and confident stride, she was everything Caleb was not. But when she smiled, There was a warmth that made Caleb feel like maybe, just maybe, he belonged here. "Mr. West, thank you for coming," she greeted him, her voice calm but commanding. "I understand you're the one who fixed our ambulance on Highway 23. Caleb nodded, unsure of how to respond. "Yeah, it was just something I had to do." Elaine took a seat across from him, her gaze unwavering but not unkind. "Well, that something you did saved a life. More than just one. Actually, you're a man who acts when others might hesitate. That's a rare quality." Caleb swallowed, feeling his nerves prickle. Was she just being polite, or was she really seeing something in him? "I just did what I knew needed to be done," he said again. Elaine leaned forward, the light from the window catching her features, making her look every bit the powerful woman she was. "I think you're selling yourself short. You didn't just fix an engine. You saved a life. More than that. You saw a need and acted. That's the kind of initiative we need at Thompson Enterprises." Caleb shifted in his seat, the weight of her words sinking in. He'd always been told that a mechanic's life was simple: fix what's broken and move on. But here was Elaine, telling him that what he did had value far beyond his tools and the grease under his nails. It made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he was more than the small-town mechanic he'd always been. "I don't know what you're offering, Mrs. Thompson," Caleb said, his voice more steady now. "But I'm listening." Elaine smiled, a small, knowing smile that made Caleb feel like he was on the verge of something big. "I'm offering you a chance to lead a new division at our company. We've been looking for someone who doesn't just see things through the lens of theory, but someone who knows how things work in the real world. Someone like you." The words hung in the air for a moment. Caleb's mind raced, his thoughts trying to catch up with what his ears had just heard. A chance to lead, a chance to build something bigger than himself. Elaine continued, "We want to create a team that evaluates our vehicles not just on computer models and designs, but by how they perform under real conditions. Your experience in the field working with machines that need to be fixed, often in life and death situations, gives you insight that we simply don't have in the corporate world." Caleb's breath caught in his throat. This was no longer just an offer to work at a desk. This was a new direction, a new path, a chance to do something that mattered on a larger scale. He'd been living a simple life, one focused on the immediate needs of the cars that came into his shop. But now, someone wanted to give him the power to shape the future of an entire company. "Why me?" he asked, his voice low, almost hesitant. "I'm just a guy from the garage." Elaine's eyes softened, and for the first time, Caleb saw a glimpse of the woman behind the powerful CEO. Because you understand how things break, you know the true cost of a malfunction, not just to a car, but to the people depending on it. "That's why I want you on my team. I think you could be the bridge we need between the theoretical and the practical." Caleb sat in silence, his heart pounding in his chest. He had come here today to meet a woman who might offer him a job. What he hadn't expected was to have his entire life redefined in a single conversation. It wasn't just about fixing cars anymore. This was about fixing a system, about ensuring that what he did could have an impact on thousands of lives. The weight of the decision was heavy, but there was a quiet excitement beginning to build within him. A door was opening, and he could either walk through it or turn back to what he knew. Elaine stood up, and Caleb followed suit. "Take the night to think about it," she said. "I can see you're not sure yet, but when you're ready, we'd be honored to have you." As Caleb left the office, his mind was in a whirl. But one thing was clear: life was about to get a lot bigger. The man who had once been content to get his hands dirty fixing cars in a small-town garage was now standing on the threshold of something much larger than himself. The next morning, Caleb stood at the window of his modest apartment, watching the city wake up. The skyline of Charleston was bathed in soft morning light. And for the first time in a long while, Caleb felt a sense of possibility that had nothing to do with the cars he'd fixed or the engines he knew inside out. His phone buzzed on the countertop. It was a message from Elaine Thompson. "Ready for the next step. Meet me at the office in 2 hours." Caleb took a deep breath, his reflection in the glass staring back at him. He wasn't the same person who'd walked into Elaine's office just a day ago. He wasn't sure exactly what was ahead. But one thing was clear: he was stepping into a new life. After a quick breakfast, Caleb drove across town, his worn-out truck humming steadily beneath him. He had always been someone who fixed things, from engines to relationships, and now he was being asked to fix something bigger, a company, an industry, maybe even the way people thought about the work he had done for years. When he arrived at Thompson Enterprises, the building looked as imposing as ever. The sleek glass and steel tower rose into the sky, casting long shadows across the streets below. Inside, things felt different. Caleb was no longer just an outsider, someone who didn't belong in these polished halls. Now, he was part of the team, a team that didn't just talk about change, but embraced it. Elaine was waiting for him in the conference room, a few of her top executives by her side. She gave him a nod as he entered, signaling for him to take a seat. Caleb had a feeling this moment was more than just another step in his career. It felt like the beginning of something monumental, not just for him, but for everyone he was about to work with. "Caleb," Elaine began, her voice steady yet filled with determination, "you've shown us what real-world insight can do. Your approach to vehicle safety, how you see what others miss, is exactly why we're here. But this is bigger than just fixing problems with cars. It's about a vision for the future where safety and integrity lead every decision." Caleb glanced around the room, the faces of engineers, designers, and corporate executives all staring back at him. There was respect there, not just for his skills, but for who he was, someone who valued doing the right thing, no matter the cost. Elaine continued, "I'm asking you to lead this new division. You'll have the authority to reshape how we design, test, and produce our vehicles. But more importantly, you'll be setting a standard for the entire industry, an industry that's often too focused on profits to remember the people they serve." Caleb took a deep breath. This wasn't just a job. It was a responsibility. A responsibility to make a difference in the lives of countless families who would drive the cars he and his team would improve. "I'll do my best," Caleb said, his voice calm but firm. "I know how it feels to have lives depend on a vehicle, and I won't stop until we make every car we produce as safe as possible." Elaine smiled, a rare expression of pride crossing her face. "That's exactly why I brought you here. Caleb, you understand the real-world consequences of what we do. Now, it's time to take that understanding to a whole new level." As the meeting ended, Caleb stepped out of the conference room, the weight of what he had agreed to settling over him. He had always believed that his purpose in life was to fix things, but now, that purpose had expanded. He wasn't just fixing cars anymore. He was fixing a system, helping to create a future where safety and integrity mattered more than profits. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, politics, and moments when it seemed like everything was stacked against him. But Caleb knew that his decisions were guided by something much stronger than fear integrity. He had always done what needed to be done, no matter the cost. And now, that principle was leading him toward a future that was about to change the world. As he walked to his office, Caleb caught a glimpse of his reflection in the glass. The mechanic he had been was still there. But now, he was also someone who was part of something larger. Someone who was shaping the future, one decision at a time. And that was only the beginning. The journey of Caleb Thompson, from a simple mechanic to the head of a new division at Thompson Enterprises, teaches us a powerful life lesson: doing the right thing, even when it's hard, always pays off in the end. Whether it's fixing an ambulance in the pouring rain or choosing to stand up for what you believe in, integrity and making decisions based on moral clarity can reshape not only your life, but also the lives of others. In a world driven by profits, Caleb's ability to prioritize safety and human lives over financial gain makes him an invaluable asset to the company. This story reminds us that the true value of character comes from sticking to our principles, especially when faced with tough choices. Have you ever faced a tough decision that changed the course of your life? We'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life lessons and life-changing moments.